The night of October 14th, 1959, seemed ordinary in the valleys outside Valencia. Autumn rains had fallen for days, soaking the fields and filling the rivers. Farmers checked their animals before bed. Children played inside while their mothers cooked stews that steamed the windows, and shopkeepers swept rainwater away from their doorways. People in Beneixida, Salent, and the other small villages along the Erguer River were used to storms. But far above them, in the mountains where the Turia cut its narrow valleys, an aging dam was straining to hold back more water than it could bear. The Pantano de Tus reservoir, once hailed as a symbol of Spain's progress, was a time bomb. Before midnight, it gave way, and the flood that followed erased entire communities. The collapse came without warning. Survivors later recalled that the first sign was a deep vibration under the ground, like the growl of thunder locked inside stone. Then came the roar, deeper and louder than anything they had ever heard, as the reservoir burst free. A wall of water crashed down the valley, black and boiling, carrying with it boulders, trees, and the shattered remains of the dam. Houses splintered in seconds. Families were torn apart before they could even reach their doors. The lucky ones clung to rooftops or trees. Most were swept away into the darkness. The Pantano de Tus had been controversial from its earliest days. Built as part of General Franco's ambitious push to modernize Spain, the dam was supposed to bring stability to the Turia River and provide water for Valencia's farmlands. Propaganda praised it as a triumph of engineering and proof that Spain was marching forward. But locals had their doubts. Cracks appeared soon after construction. The gates rusted and jammed. Farmers whispered that the dam was unsafe, that one day it would betray them. Yet in Franco's Spain, criticizing a state project was dangerous. To question the dam was to question the regime itself. Officials dismissed the rumors, declaring the structure sound. By October 1959, storms hammered the mountains for nearly 2 weeks. Rain poured without pause, feeding the reservoir until it swelled higher than ever. The sluice gates, which should have been releasing water, had jammed completely. Engineers filed warnings, but permission to act stalled in the bureaucratic silence of a dictatorship that punished bad news. On the night of the 14th, the water finally broke through. Beneixida lay directly in its path. Within minutes, the town was gone. Survivors described hearing the rush of water and grabbing children in the dark, only to be thrown into a torrent that ripped houses from their foundations. One woman recalled waking to the sound of her husband shouting, the crash of their walls giving way, and then nothing but cold black water. Salent fared little better. Only the stone bell tower remained standing. Everything else was reduced to rubble and mud. Survivors huddled at its base through the night, listening to the cries of neighbors fading one by one into silence. When dawn revealed the valley, the destruction was beyond comprehension. Fields that had been green with rice and orchards were buried beneath sludge. Roads and bridges vanished, replaced by gullies cut by the flood. Rail lines twisted like wires. Dead animals lay in the mud beside human bodies. Families wandered dazed, searching for loved ones. Some identified them only by a scrap of clothing or a wedding ring. In Beneixida, not a single home remained standing. The entire village had been erased in hours. The official death toll was 144, though locals believed it was far higher. Dozens of bodies were never recovered, carried to the sea. Whole families disappeared. In many households, every name was wiped from the record books in one night. Funerals were hurried, mass graves dug in wet ground. Priests walked from coffin to coffin, blessing the dead while survivors wept over the loss of their neighbors, their history, their homes. In Valencia, news of the catastrophe spread slowly. Franco's government moved to control the story, portraying the flood as an unavoidable act of God, rather than the result of negligence. State newspapers emphasized the bravery of soldiers and relief workers. They avoided questions about the jammed gates and ignored the warnings that had gone unheeded. But photographs leaked through. Children's bodies lined beneath blankets, mothers clutching lifeless infants, whole villages flattened into fields of mud. The truth was impossible to hide. Relief efforts poured into the valley. Soldiers distributed food and blankets. Doctors treated the injured. Volunteers dug through the ruins for survivors, though hope dwindled quickly. Survivors from Beni Exida were relocated to a new settlement, Nuevo Beni Exida, built nearby. But those who moved there never forgot what had been lost. The new homes were walls and roofs without roots. The spirit of the old community, its plazas and narrow streets, lay drowned under layers of mud. For farmers, the disaster was a financial death sentence. Land that had sustained generations was left unworkable. Crops were destroyed, livestock drowned, irrigation channels clogged with silt. Entire livelihoods vanished. Children grew up haunted by memories of the flood. Some spoke decades later of lying awake at night, still hearing the roar of the dam breaking, the cries of neighbors swept away. Survivors described the guilt of living when so many others had died, a guilt that lingered long after the mud dried. The Erguer River Flood left scars that could not be buried. Weddings, funerals, and baptisms once held in the old villages were relocated to new churches. Annual commemorations were quietly observed. Stories passed down among survivors grew into a kind of oral history, each retelling keeping alive the details that the regime had tried to bury. They remembered how warnings had been ignored, how cracks had been dismissed, how silence and pride had killed as surely as the water itself. In the years that followed, Spain modernized its infrastructure. Dam inspections grew stricter, safety standards tightened. Engineers studied the Too's collapse carefully, hoping to prevent another disaster. But progress came at a cost. For those who had lost everything, new regulations meant little. They asked why action hadn't been taken sooner, why the price of change had to be paid in lives. Today, the memory of the Erguer River Flood lingers in plaques and monuments scattered across the valley. They mark the places where homes once stood and families died. Visitors to the region can see little evidence of the destruction, but the names remain etched in stone, carried forward in memory. Each October, survivors and their descendants gather to honor the dead, retelling the story so it will not fade. They speak of the roar that split the night, the wave that erased their homes, and the silence that followed. The Erguer River Flood of 1959 was more than a natural disaster. It was a man-made catastrophe, the product of arrogance, neglect, and a system that silenced warnings. The dam was meant to protect, but it became a weapon against the people it was built to serve. Its collapse reminds us that when pride and politics take precedence over safety, it is the innocent who pay the ultimate price. Thank you for listening to Road to Ruins. Subscribe for more true stories of where systems fail and people pay the price.